Hello, everybody. Welcome to the True Claims Podcast, brought to you by the Davis Law Group. My name is Eric Johnson. We'll bring in Chris Davis in just a quick second. First, a couple of moments to tell you kind of what it is, set the stage for what we're going to do. We like to take a true claim, as we call them, an accident injury case, break down that case, a case that eventually found its way to the Davis Law Group attorneys. We break down the case, give you some of the facts of the matter, who's at fault, who's not at fault, why they're at fault. We talk about the process that the attorneys go for, and then we talk about the damages at the end. We're going to begin right now with Chris Davis. Chris, welcome once again. This is our ninth podcast, right?
I know. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. And this case, I was looking at the pictures of this, and man, I can just see how this would happen. A guy named Stephen in Sammamish is riding his bicycle. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so he's riding his bicycle, and he's on the street on the bike path next to the street. And as he's riding along, he encounters a new curb that the city of Sammamish had installed, blocking the bicycle path at an intersection. And he had been through that area just a few weeks earlier, and it wasn't there. So this was a brand new curb that blended in with its surroundings, and he never saw it before hitting it and then catapulting over his bike and being severely injured. Now,
I looked at the pictures of this, as I mentioned, and you're right. Now, a lot of people's initial reaction is, well, you got to be looking where you're going, right? You got to keep your eyes open. But in this situation, he's going through an intersection on the bike path. The bike path continues at the end of the intersection. I'm imagining Stephen looking for cars, trying to figure out, where he's going, make sure there's no vehicles. And then as he proceeds going 27 miles an hour, this thing really does blend in, doesn't it? If you had been on that path before, there was absolutely no reason you would expect to see a curb there.
Yeah, and it's quite remarkable because the city had actually violated its own engineering and safety standards. It also violated national engineering and safety standards by not properly marking the curb, putting reflectors on it, or also installing signs. The other criticism that one of my experts had was the purpose of installing that curb in the first place. There really was no reason to block off the bicycle path. They wanted to continue the curb on the separating the bike path from the lane, and they wrapped it around that intersection, which blocked cyclists from traveling that way.
Yeah, if you were on that bike path and wanted to continue on the other side of the intersection, you would have to essentially stop, wind your way around that curved curb, and then somehow kind of traverse your way back onto the path, right?
Yeah, and like you said earlier, the color of that curb, the cement color, blended in with the background of the color of the bike path. So it's not hard to understand why my client missed it.
Let's talk about your client's injuries. Stephen was hurt badly, and again, these pictures speak volumes. I mean, the whole side of his body is not just bruised, but actually black, broken bones.
Yeah, pretty severe injuries. I think he broke 8 ribs, suffered a traumatic brain injury, and then broke his collarbone in 2 places, requiring emergency surgery. I believe his medical bills were more than $160,000, and he was in the hospital or the clinic for a few days. And as you mentioned, the photos are pretty severe. They show pretty dark bruising all down his torso. So very serious injuries, yes.
Can you take us through? I'm imagining that sometime the victim in a situation like this their first line of thinking might be, I screwed up. I didn't see that curb. It was my fault. Do you know if Stephen thought that way at all? Or was it immediately, that is a wrong situation? I was not at fault. I need to get a hold of somebody.
Yeah, because Stephen had traveled in that area before on his bicycle, he knew right away that what the city did was wrong. As I said earlier, and he did his own research, I believe, he found out that the city also violated some national safety standards by not marking that curb. In fact, Stephen reached out to us, I think, within a few weeks of the accident. So he knew he was right, and he was right, that the city screwed up big time here.
So he reaches out to you. He's done some research. Where do you take it from there?
Well, the first thing we want to know is, did you get photographs? It's really, really important for people to take photographs of the condition that caused the harm right away. We want to preserve the condition of the property at the time of the incident, and thankfully he did that. And we saw from the photographs right away, and we knew from our work on other bicycle cases the standards that apply. So we knew right off the bat that the city violated those standards.
So you're looking at those photos and you're saying, we have a case.
Yeah, it was a very strong case.
And then from that point on, do you reach out to the city? How do you go about getting evidence?
Yeah, so when you sue the government in Washington State, you're required to submit what they call a tort claim form. And every city or municipality has their own link typically to the form. You have to fill it out. You have to serve the city and wait 60 days before bringing a lawsuit. In many cases, well, most cases, when we sue the government, the odds are pretty high that we have to file a lawsuit. And that's because more often than not, the risk pool managers involved with city claims or county claims are very difficult to deal with. And so I've learned over the years not to waste my time, especially on very serious cases like this one. And I think we filed suit within 6 months of accepting the case.
And when you reach out to a city in a case like this, are they defensive at first? Do they admit guilt? Certainly by looking at this, there must have been a voice in the back of their minds going, uh-oh,
yeah,
this wasn't right.
The city and the counties, they receive a lot of claims, right? So typically when we file the tort claim, we don't hear anything. Sometimes we may get a letter saying, yeah, we received your claim. Very small percentage of cases, we might get a response and an offer to the claim. But more often than not, there's no negotiations. And again, that's one factor that we look at as far as deciding to file a lawsuit.
So you filed a lawsuit. This is, by the way, somewhat similar to the Carl Schwartz case that we discussed a few episodes ago. There was that bollard in the middle of a bike lane, and he was riding his bike and hit that and was severely injured. How was it similar, and also how is it different?
The major difference between the Carl Schwartz cases is Carl's injury happened on a recreation trail. And in Washington State, there is a law that's called the Recreational Use Immunity Statute that protects landowners from being sued if people are using the land for recreational purposes and they get hurt. It's a huge hurdle, big obstacle. We have to turn away 50 or more claims every year because of that statute. In Stephen's case, the accident happened on a major road. And the laws and the rules governing public roads are different than recreational trails. And so Stephen's case was a lot easier to prove and win than Carl Schwartz's case.
So do you put out a number immediately when this case goes forward? You put out a number. My client needs this amount, and then the city reacts to that. Do they try to lowball you, or how does that work? So
in Washington State, the law that requires us to submit a tort claim requires that we include an amount of damages. And usually we file the tort claim early on in the case and before our client has healed. And so more often than not, we pick a very large number because we don't want to be bound in, right, if it turns out the damages are much higher later on. So we do pick a very high number that we don't expect to receive. Sometimes we do, but more often than not, we don't. And that's really starts the claim process. And as I said earlier, though, most cities, most counties ignore that tort claim. We still have to wait the 60 days. After the 60 days has elapsed, then we can file a lawsuit. Once a lawsuit is filed, it can take several months in discovery, exchanging information, taking depositions. At some point, most cases will be subject to alternative dispute resolution, or ADR. One of the most frequent and common ways of using ADR is mediations. So most of the cases when we file against the government usually asks us to participate in a mediation, and I believe that's what happened in this case.
You mentioned how important it is and how key it was to this case that Stephen took photos.
Right.
He took photos of his injury. He took photos of what it looked like from his bicycle. What if he had not done that? What if he had waited a month and then reached out to you guys? His body had healed up. Maybe by then they could have put up reflectors or something, knowing that he had crashed. I mean, that's important, isn't it?
It's hugely important. So let's talk about the liability aspect of the case, not taking photos, so that we don't have a record of what the condition looked like at the time of the incident. As you mentioned mentioned earlier, something can change. The curb could have been removed, reflectors could have been installed, right? And that could have been a big problem in the case, unless we had other witnesses to verify what the condition looked like and that it was present at the time of Stephen's injury. That's number one. So liability photos of the area in question, very, very important. Then when we talk about damages in a case and preserving what the injuries looked like early on in the case, also very, very important, because oftentimes when we try to settle a case, when we're talking to an insurance adjuster or a risk pool representative for the city or a jury in trial, our job is to, convey and illustrate how serious the injuries are. So photos are a big piece of that. We always tell our clients early on to take periodic photos at different points in time. So if we need to, we can show the story of your injuries by using those photographs. So very, very important.
You're always hoping, I'm guessing, that there's a video camera somewhere. There wasn't in this situation, I take it, but that's always such a key factor as well.
In every case that we have, our investigator will look at the area in question and comb the area in many cases to find out if a business or even a residence had some sort of camera in place. And as time has gone on over the last few years, more often than not, we do find some surveillance footage, either from a nearby business or a residence, that actually captures or partially captures the incident on camera.
Okay, so the case moves forward for Stephen. How was it resolved? What did the settlement look like?
So when we accepted his case, which was about a month after the incident, we had to wait and see how his injuries and treatment unfolded. So there's a big difference in value when we look at a case where the injuries resolve completely and there's no future problems, versus a case where there's going to be a permanent injury, and then the question is, okay, how does this injury affect the person's life, either their work or their daily activities? So permanent injuries are going to have much more value than injuries that heal completely. So we had to wait several months in Stephen's case to find out how his injuries healed and what permanent limitations, if any, that he had and how they affected his life. With that information, we can come up with a pretty good range in what we think is a fair settlement. And we base that range on other cases that we've handled that are similar, and also verdicts that have been rendered by juries for similar types of injuries.
And can you tell us what the settlement was on this case?
In Stephen's case, I believe we settled the case for $750,000.
So that would take care of, his medical costs, and he's going to be having medical costs for a long time.
I think he made mostly a pretty good recovery. I think he would need periodic care in the future, but nothing that serious. But $750,000 for an injury that mostly resolves is a pretty good case.
Chris, what would you say to someone watching this who says to themselves, come on, man, you're on a bicycle. You should have been paying attention. The whole point riding a bicycle is to be aware of your surroundings. Yeah. You weren't aware of your surroundings, and now the city has to pay X amount of money. How do you, I'm sure you hear that a lot.
We hear that in virtually every case involving a cyclist, and it's always an issue in the case. And so we look at the surrounding circumstances of how the incident happened. In this case, the city screwed up pretty big. I mean, they violated their own engineering and safety principles and standards, and also national safety standards. In Washington, we have a law that's called comparative fault, which means that when somebody brings a claim, the defendant can argue that you were also negligent that contributed to the incident, and the jury is left then with assigning percentages, right? So in Stephen's case, the city did try to argue comparative fault, that he should have seen it. But when you look at those photos and the fact that the city installed this new curb just a few weeks earlier, and he had been through that area many times before without the curb, we had a pretty strong case to show that the city had most of the blame, if not all of the blame.
What should our takeaway be from this case? A lot of us out there ride bikes. A lot of us are driving and are aware of pedestrians and bicyclers. What should the takeaway be of this case?
Well, and I think most, if not every cyclist knows this, always be aware of your surroundings, right? And, over the last probably 5 to 10 years, as cycling has gained in popularity, we're seeing more bicycle crashes with things on the road like curbs, other vehicles, pedestrians. Cyclists need to keep an eye out for their surroundings, just like a driver needs to do the same. I would say, though, the cyclist should take more of an effort, because if they're going to be in an accident with a vehicle, the vehicle's always going to win, right? So the cyclists really have to go above and beyond as far as protecting themselves.
I'm always so impressed how you and your fellow attorneys understand the laws, the rules, the statutes, the various rules of the road, of putting curbs down. And I happen to know that you have gone out of your way to create something so that people can refer to it to understand those rules and laws themselves, right? One of your books deals specifically with cyclists.
Yeah, I've got about, I think, 14 books now, but one of the books addresses cycling claims. And there are special concerns, laws that apply to those types of incidences. And we give that book away for free, and it's pretty popular. We've been giving the book away for free for probably 7 or 8 years now. I think we've given probably a couple of thousand, if not more, away.
They're amazing. And they cover a whole gamut of types of cases, right?
Exactly.
Dogs and
dog
cycles.
Bite, regular car accidents, trucking accidents, pedestrian accidents, accidents or injuries involving children and children claims. So many different topics for different types of cases.
I've looked at all of them. You open it up to any page, you start reading, and you learn something that you didn't know. Right. So they're a huge service. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the True Claims Podcast. That's Chris Davis. I'm Eric Johnson. Until next time, we'll see you later. Eric Johnson here. I spent the last 30 years reporting on what you need to know, and now I've got something I think everyone could use. The Washington Accident Book Series offers a free legal guidebook on everything from car crashes to dog bites, so that you know what to expect after any kind of accident. Know your rights and how to avoid common mistakes after an accident by getting your free copy at WashingtonAccidentBooks.com.